Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartiya and welcome to TFR Let's Talk. Today we have with us Sanjay Nagraj, co-founder and CTO at Traceable.ai. Sanjay, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Swapnil. This should be fun.
It will be. We have been covering Traceable AI for a long time, but this is the first time you are on our show. So I would love to know a bit about the history and the story of Traceable AI. What led you to co-found this company? What problem were you trying to solve?
So the journey started I would say, about 5.5 to 6 years ago, as Traceable was founded at that time. But the history of the company starts with me and my co-founder Jyoti Bansal, who are part of building another company called App Dynamics in the application performance management space. Where we were solving performance problems for next generation of web applications at that time for some of the largest customers, largest enterprises on the planet. One of the things that we were seeing when the App Dynamics journey was happening was customers were coming to us on a regular basis and asking us, we are having microservices come about. This is going back to about 2016, 2017 timeframe, where customers microservices are coming up every now and then. They're growing like mushrooms to some extent, and we don't know where they are, where the APIs that are part of these services exist. Can you help us actually identify that? Right? That means that this was something that, as a conversation, started to become even more and more expressed with some of the customers that we started to talk to after we founded Traceable as well. So the problem started there, where without the visibility of these APIs and microservices, how could they actually protect these APIs? Because every business today, if not definitely 4 or 5 years ago when we started this, was becoming an API-driven business. And today, that's only accelerated because of all of the digital transformation that took, not just during the pandemic, but the post-pandemic era that way, where APIs became central to the existence of a business. That means that for you to protect that business itself, you need to know how you can protect those APIs, right? And that's where the journey started, Swapnil. And obviously, it's been a good journey over the last 5 years building the company and where we are today.
In these 5 years, a lot has changed, and not a lot has changed depending on how we look at it. So I would also like to talk a bit about the evolution of the company, the evolution, of course, from the product services point of view, and also the growth of the company as well, because you folks also announced a funding round in May. So let's also look at the growth of the company.
As part of the journey of the company, we're very happy in terms of the types of customers that we have been able to serve over the last many years, including some of the largest financial services to banks, to digital payment providers, to insurance companies and healthcare and everything else. Even some of the largest retail and entertainment companies on the planet. Some of these guys that we've been serving as our customers, we're very happy with the journey that we have taken. Of course, from a revenue perspective, the growth has been phenomenal. You're right. We recently announced a strategic investment round, which with City Ventures as well, being part of the journey and continue to be part of the journey with us as after the investment. But it was all due to the not just the growth from a revenue perspective, as you were talking about, 300% ARR growth year over year, which is significant given the market conditions, given the tightening in terms of the spend from these large enterprises. But it is also the customer validation that's coming because of the work that we have been doing with these customers. That means that any of not just these investors, but as the customer reference calls happen for us across these customers, it's always heartening to hear these customers tell about how our simple thought process on how do we make these customers successful is at the forefront of everything that we do as a company. That means that the customer obsession that we have to make these customers successful is the one that comes across for any of these customers that we talk to.
From the technology point of view or product point of view, a lot of emerging trends, emerging workloads, emerging technologies have also they have showed up in the last couple of years. I mean, the hottest one is Gen AI these days. Also, also security is also becoming an important topic. It's no longer an afterthought. It is moving to boardrooms. CISOs. Talk a bit about in your evolution. What are some of these new technology, new workload you have seen, and how you are either catering to these workload or leveraging these new technologies?
So just to actually answer the question that you had prior and also this, I'll tie that together, which was how does the product evolve? How has the technology evolved that way? If you think about it, as I was saying before, the business journey started where customers asked us the question to provide visibility into their APIs and microservices to begin with. But what we approached it was rather than going just the visibility, solving the visibility problem, how can we build a product and a platform that can solve the overall API protection for them? That means that you can actually go and discover the APIs, you can protect those APIs, but also test those APIs. The platform evolved over a period of time from being a runtime protection company to be an end-to-end security platform. Right. And the reason why we approached it that way was we wanted to go build a platform that can actually solve this at enterprise scale by collecting data about your APIs at scale and ingesting and processing them at scale. Then we provided all of the API security insights on top of it, including the discovery of those APIs, the testing associated with those APIs for vulnerabilities and risk assessment, and runtime protection of those APIs, along with the underlying layer of security analytics that powers all of these things with our API security data lake. That's the approach that we took from a platform perspective from day one, where we spent the first couple of years building that core platform, right? So the reason why I highlight that is that means that as the evolution of services happened to where we are today, and even if you think about, I always think about pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, if you think about it, API usage significantly increased during the pandemic. If you can imagine, people were no longer standing in lines at Starbucks within the Starbucks complex itself, but they were outside ordering mostly from mobiles and picking up a lot of the orders as part of the drive-throughs. So significant usage of mobile applications increased during the pandemic, as an example. That's only continued. Right now, one of the things, as you were talking about, Gen AI is something that came along a couple of years ago, where the interesting part is when Traceable came along, Traceable.ai was the company. And everybody was talking in security that, oh, AI is part of this. Oh, we have heard AI is all magic. It doesn't do things and whatnot, right? So cut to now 2021, that way 21, 22 time frame, where ChatGPT came along and actually made the whole aspect of AI understanding of language models very real for a lot of the people. That means that it was no longer magic that people couldn't experience or couldn't see. The reality of daily usage started to come into being. And of course, there has been a lot of changes associated with that, right? But what we are seeing now is there are tons of Gen AI applications that are getting built across these large enterprises. But the biggest challenge again is coming with the Gen AI applications as well as where are these Gen AI apps? Where are they getting deployed? How are they getting utilized? What are the security ramifications associated with it and considerations that need to be there when the CISO is talking to the board or CISO is actually thinking about the overall security posture? That's where we are starting to see a lot of interest from our customers and prospects as we talk to them about how do we actually discover these Gen AI applications. Because at the end of the day, all of these Gen AI apps as well are API driven. Because the way some of these things work is that either they are using internal language models or external services like OpenAI or Gemini or anything else that is hosted out there. You need to be able to discover those. You need to be able to test those APIs to make sure that they're not leaking sensitive data across organizations or they are kind of enabling attackers to come in and take the data out of these language models, which are very sensitive data associated with the enterprise itself. So we basically evolved the product to make sure we support Gen AI APIs as well to discover, test, and protect and enable security analytics on top of the data because it's built on the same platform that I was talking about, which has the API security data lake, which builds this broader context about the business.
And since we are talking about security, a couple of months ago, there was one of the biggest security-related conference, RSA. Did you folks make any announcement there? And if yes, talk a bit about that.
So as part of that, there are two things that we discussed. One is, of course, the funding as an announcement. Right? Funding as an announcement. The main thing that I always look at that is in a few parts. One is Traceable as a company. Why should anybody invest in the company, right? The key thing was that the product innovation that we have, the security research initiatives that we go through, and how we have been able to scale the enterprise execution in terms of ensuring our customers are successful with it were some of the reasons why. Of course, we talked about the revenue growth and all that, but the broader ecosystem of customers, we talked about that as to be the key to investing in Traceable, right? That was one part of it. The second part of it was that we announced from a product perspective two aspects of it. One was the new modules around GenAI, which was the GenAI discovery and testing and AI protection from an AI firewall perspective as part of GenAI API protection. We announced that and working with customers very actively to get them deployed and actually many prospects as we went through the conversation. We talked about that at RSA. The second thing we talked about is maturing our fraud offering from an API perspective. How can we detect and mitigate some of the fraud and bot activities that are happening on APIs, because a lot of the things are shifting towards API activities, because most of the traffic today, 90+% of the traffic is API traffic that is flowing through these applications, right? So those are some of the things that we talked about as part of our launch at RSA. One other thing that we did, which we talked about it also, was we started a security research part of Traceable and launched it as Aspen Labs as part of an initiative where we can identify next generation of API attacks that are happening across organizations, right? And that is something that we are very proud of, the research that's happening on that, and which is at the end of the day helping the broader community, helping, of course, our customers and some of the largest organizations to make sure that they're secure from all of the API changes that are happening across applications and services across industries.
Since we are talking about Gen AI and LLMs, can you also talk about from Traceable, or just forget about Traceable for a second and just look at you as a technologist? How do you see Gen AI and LLMs have kind of radically changed the things, and it doesn't matter which industry we are in; they are literally touching every industry out there.
Absolutely, and I think from a Gen AI perspective, one thing we all have to recognize is that we are just getting started to identify all of the use cases that can be built on top of the core technology itself from language models perspective. I think we're barely getting started. From a security perspective, there are a lot of applications that are going to come in terms of providing understanding the posture or not just from a cloud perspective, from a code perspective, and from even enhancing all of the dev practices from a security perspective. A lot of changes are going to come. Now, if you start to shift your attention to more of how it gets used from a security and operations perspective, but also from actionability perspective, I do believe a lot of the AI agent technologies that are going to get built over the next months and years that way will have a huge impact as part of the security, a broader security ecosystem itself. And Traceable, of course, is deploying some of those techniques for our customers and building products on top of the same technologies that others are getting, that people are using to solve generic use cases for applications, right? But at the same time, I'm very excited about the direction, not just in terms of security, but where the broader industry is going to go in terms of healthcare applications to financial applications, to education and retail and everything else, right? Because today we have only seen it getting used in a lot of cases around chatbots and anything that can be extended on top of the human interactions, that way that can happen with the customers. But where I see the advancements happening in actionability based on broader context of data, which requires a lot of machine learning and AI to be used, but then presenting them to the end users in a digestible fashion, right? So there's a lot of exciting changes that I see happening over the next many years as we go and rethink how what to say, various interactions with humans is going to change. Interactions with the APIs and applications is going to change. So exciting times that we are living in.
We kind of live in an API driven, API centric world. From your perspective, how happy you are with the state of API security today? We cover a lot of reports where we feel that there is a lot of awareness, but organizations are not able to do what is needed to be done in terms of security. Sometimes we also realize that they are not even aware of a lot of threats. So, from your perspective, what are you seeing?
So I think there has been a significant change. If you had asked me, I don't know, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, even, a lot of the security leaders and practitioners that we used to talk to used to be in a state of API security education, where either they used to be like, okay, do I need to care about API security? Or it used to be the case where, like, no, it's not yet a priority. So that we have seen a significant shift over the last 18 months, right? That is not only just reflected in our expansion in terms of revenue as a company and growth as a company, but also we can see that as part of every single board conversation happening about what are you doing, Mr. CISO or Mr. Security Leader, head of product security, about APIs. So now the conversations have shifted. So I'm pretty happy with a lot of the security leaders taking this very, very seriously now, right? That's one point. But what remains is, still as a challenge, is for people to understand that API security is not just about discovering of APIs, or it is not just about testing of those APIs. API security is a lot more about finally protecting those APIs end to end. That means that yes, discovery is important, testing is important, but also runtime protection aspects of it are very, very critical, because you cannot go with your legacy WAF or CDN WAFs, however you want to look at it, and say, can you now go and protect those APIs as well? Because that's what they've been telling you for the last 5 years that they can protect, but we still continue to see all of the attacks happening. That means that this is where some of the security leadership across the board that I've been talking to are rethinking that their existing WAFs and existing CDNs will not be able to protect them against API attacks. They need innovative technologies like Traceable to go actually protect against API attacks, right? And so that change, I'm seeing it gradually happening that way. The one thing that I keep bringing up as part of the conversations is we talked about Gen AI, so people have to understand the Gen AI apps, Gen AI security, how it's part of securing your APIs broadly, because they are APIs at the end of the day. But on also on the topic from a protection perspective, a lot of the conversation that we are having with our customers is about how API abuse and API fraud and API bot mitigation are use cases that they need to be considering now, because the attacks are only getting sophisticated. And we are seeing that in terms of some of the recent attacks that you have seen, without naming, where we have seen some of the largest telco providers being breached, and healthcare providers. A lot of these is through API attacks that are happening, right? So that means that we need to take this very, very seriously. And I'm happy to state that all the conversations that I've been having with some of the largest enterprises in the US and starting worldwide as well, they're all starting to recognize this as a challenge, and so it is in the number one, number two priorities for most of the people that I'm talking to. So I'm pretty happy with that.
Perfect, thank you. And now, since we are talking about Gen AI as well, how is Gen AI making kind of things even more difficult for security teams and API security, especially? what are the unique challenges and threats you're seeing there because of Gen AI?
There are two aspects of it that I want to talk about, and the way I look at Gen AI is like a dual-edged a lightsaber that way. Where there is a dark side and there is a light side, if I were to think of it as Star Wars analogy that way. Because the challenge is that Gen AI, like we are using from a security perspective, or there are many good applications getting built on top of it, there are also bad actors who are going to use that now. What in some cases was API hacking was considered to be a little bit more sophisticated than your regular attack surface from an applications perspective in terms of exploitability. Because of the usage of Gen AI, there is potential, and we have already seen some of that, that the hackers are able to become a lot more sophisticated by using the technology. So on the dark side, it's assisting them to go and attack these APIs. So it's making the problem worse because now you have a lot more attackers who can actually access the APIs which are not designed well. Right? That's one part of it. The second part of it is that Gen AI, when you think about people using Copilot and everything else, there are issues that are coming out of that because if people don't necessarily have the context from a secure coding and secure design perspective, there are challenges being there are issues that are being introduced as part of the dev lifecycle itself, where because of lack of proper lack of reviews and everything else from a secure design perspective, we are starting to see that there are more and more vulnerabilities that are actually being introduced from some of the usage of Gen AI as well. Again, am I telling that that shouldn't be the case, shouldn't be used? No. All I'm making as a suggestion is that security practices across the board needs to be looked at now as an with an additional parameter into consideration as to the usage of Gen AI from a coding practices perspective, right? So the again, like with everything else, any new technology that comes in, as it goes through the maturity curve, you will have challenges. But one good thing that I truly believe is from a security perspective is that security as an ecosystem, as a group, has come together and started to think about security as part of the journey of Gen AI from the beginnings itself. Right? OWASP, for example, my good friend Steve Wilson, for example, worked on the OWASP top 10 for LLMs and Gen AI applications almost from the get-go when the launch of language models started to come together. That means that we are starting to think about security in conjunction with how code is being written as well for some of these applications. So it's exciting to see that, but there is a lot of things to be cautious about, both on the hackers utilizing it as well as on how we actually utilize for enhancing our security best practices as well.
I would love to also know about what are the things in your pipeline, but I'm also sure that you'll share those when they're ready, and of course we'll get you folks on the show to talk about those. But just give us a teaser. What are the things that you folks are working on? And also, if you look at the investment round, how are you going to leverage those funds? Where are you planning to invest and grow?
One of the things about Traceable as a company, we have been very fiscally responsible in terms of how we grow the company, right? That is one of the reasons why we have raised maybe one third of what everybody else in the market had raised to build an API security product or a platform. And the reason for that is we want to make sure we're building the company for the long run and serving the customers along the way, where they can trust us for the next many years, that we will continue to be there to serve them, right? And so with this strategic round, we wanted to make sure there is a much longer runway as a company where we can take the dollars that are being invested to go and invest in the expansion of relevant areas in sales, marketing, customer success, and of course R&D as part of the investments. R&D investments, if you think about it, even from a Gen AI perspective, there is a dedicated team of engineers working on it. And of course, from a sales and marketing perspective, we are looking to focus a bit more from an international perspective slowly, where we are expanding in other regions, including Australia and UK, where we have seen a lot of interest. from Traceable perspective. So mostly the areas that we want to focus on is going to be on expanding now the repeatability across regions so that we can go and make sure the customers worldwide are served. And we'll, of course, invest a lot more into customer success as well as a company.
Sanjay, thank you so much for joining me today and talk about, of course, Traceable and also the whole ecosystem, how it's evolving. Thanks for great insights, and I would love to have you folks back on the show. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Swapnil. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun, and obviously look forward to talking to you again.